The first thing I noticed when I got home from Qatar wasn't the empty beer bottles on my kitchen counter or the strange boots by the front door. It was the way my 10-year-old son Ethan flinched when I tried to hug him. 8 months overseas working military drone contracts, and I come back to find my own kid scared of physical contact. That should have been my first clue that everything had gone to hell while I was gone. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Hey, buddy," I said, crouching down to his level in our Vancouver living room. Rain hammered the windows like it always does in January. "You okay?" Ethan glanced toward the kitchen where my wife Yara was making coffee, then back at me. "Yeah, Dad. Just tired." Tired. Right. The kid looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Where's your sister?" I asked. "Sophie's upstairs. She's been hiding in her room a lot lately." Hiding. Another red flag I should have caught immediately. Yara walked in carrying 2 mugs, handing me one without making eye contact. She looked good. Too good for a Tuesday morning at home. Full makeup, hair done, wearing clothes I'd never seen before. "Welcome back, Lucas," she said, her voice flat. "How was the flight?" "Long. We need to talk." "About what?" I gestured around the house. New furniture, expensive-looking art on the walls, a massive television that definitely wasn't there when I left. About where the money for all this came from, about whose boots those are by the door, about why our son looks terrified. Yara's jaw tightened. "Those belong to Trent. He's been helping with the kids while you were gone." "Helping how?" "Discipline coaching, structure, something they needed since their father decided Qatar was more important than his family." The accusation hit like a slap, but I kept my voice level. "I went to Qatar to pay for this house, Yara, to give us financial security. We talked about this. We talked about 3 months, not 8. She had me there. The contract had been extended twice, and I'd said yes both times. Good money, important work, and if I'm being honest, things had been tense between us before I left. The distance seemed like it might help. Clearly, I'd been wrong. "So this Trent guy," I said, "where is he now?" "At work. He owns a contracting business. Very successful." Of course he did. "And he's been staying here?" "Sometimes." The kids needed a male role model. "They have a male role model. Me, their father." Yara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A father who's never here? Who chooses money over family? Trent stepped up when you couldn't be bothered." I felt my temper rising, but forced it down. Getting angry wouldn't help me figure out what was really going on. And something was definitely going on. Ethan was still hovering near the doorway, watching us like he expected a fight to break out. "Okay," I said. "When do I get to meet this Trent?" "Tonight. He's coming for dinner." "Perfect. Looking forward to it." The rest of the day was a masterclass in awkward family dynamics. Sophie, my 7-year-old, was more affectionate than Ethan, but kept asking questions like, "Are you staying this time, Daddy?" And "Is Trent still going to live here?" Live here. That was news to me. I spent the afternoon unpacking and trying to get a read on the situation. The house felt different. Not just the new stuff, but the atmosphere. There was a tension I couldn't place, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Around 3 o'clock, I was in my home office when I heard a truck pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched a guy in his late 30s climb out of a black Ford F-150. Big guy, probably 6'2", with the kind of build that screamed former high school football star who still thought his glory days mattered. This had to be Trent. I stayed upstairs and listened to him come in like he owned the place. No knock, no hesitation. Just opened the front door and called out, "Honey, I'm home." Honey. He called my wife Honey. Their voices carried up from the kitchen, too low for me to make out words, but the tone was clear enough. Familiar, intimate, the kind of easy conversation you have with someone you've been sleeping with. I sat in my office chair, staring at the wall, trying to process what I was dealing with. My wife was having an affair. That much was obvious, but there was more to it. The way Ethan had flinched, the way Sophie asked if Trent was still going to live here, the expensive new furniture, this wasn't just cheating, this was replacement. Yara hadn't just found someone else while I was gone. She'd found someone to take my place entirely. The dinner conversation was surreal. Trent sat at the head of my dining room table, carving the roast like he was the man of the house. He was exactly what I'd expected. Loud, confident, and not nearly as smart as he thought he was. "So you're the famous Lucas," he said, not bothering to look at me while he cut the meat. "Heard a lot about you. All good, I hope. Some good, some not so good." He finally made eye contact, and his smile was pure condescension. "Kids need consistency, you know. Can't just disappear for months and expect everything to stay the same." I glanced at Yara, who was suddenly very interested in her wine glass. "No, I suppose you can't." "Trent's been amazing with them," Yara said quickly. "Really stepped up. Ethan's grades have improved, and Sophie's been more disciplined about her chores." "Discipline's important," Trent agreed. "Kids need boundaries, structure. They need to know there are consequences for their actions." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I looked at Ethan, who was pushing food around his plate without eating. "What kind of consequences?" I asked. "Nothing dramatic. Timeouts, extra chores, that sort of thing. Sometimes you have to raise your voice to get their attention." "Just raise your voice?" Trent's jaw tightened slightly. "Sometimes a little more is necessary. Kids today are soft. They need to toughen up." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Define a little more." "Lucas," Yara warned, but Trent held up a hand. "It's fine. He should know how things work around here now. Sometimes kids need a firm hand, a grab on the shoulder, a shake to get their attention. Nothing harmful, just enough to make sure they're listening." I looked at my son again. Ethan was staring at his plate, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself invisible. "You put your hands on my kids?" "I discipline them when necessary, with Yara's full support." "It's not abuse, Lucas," Yara said quickly. "It's structure, something they desperately needed." I stood up from the table. "Ethan, Sophie, go upstairs now." "Dad," Sophie started. "Now." They scrambled out of their chairs and disappeared upstairs. I waited until I heard their bedroom doors close, then turned back to Trent. "Let me be very clear about something," I said, my voice calm. "You don't touch my children, ever, for any reason." Trent laughed. "Or what? You'll report me to the authorities? Good luck with that. Yara and I will both testify that you're an unstable, absent father who abandoned his family for months. Who do you think they'll believe?" The casual arrogance of it took my breath away. This wasn't just an affair, or even just replacement. This was a complete takeover, planned and executed while I was halfway around the world. "Besides," Trent continued, "the kids are fine, better than fine. They respect me in a way they never respected you. They're afraid of you. Same thing sometimes." I looked at Yara, who was still avoiding eye contact. "This is what you want? This is the kind of man you want around our children?" "Trent cares about them," she said quietly. "He's here. He's present. He doesn't run away when things get difficult." "I didn't run away. I took a job to support this family." "You took a job to avoid this family," Yara shot back. "You've been checking out of this marriage for years, Lucas. Trent just filled the void you left behind." Maybe she was right about me checking out. Maybe our marriage had been in trouble long before I left for Qatar. But that didn't excuse what I was seeing now. "Even if that's true," I said, "it doesn't give him the right to put his hands on my kids." "Your kids?" Trent stood up, and I realized he had about 30 pounds on me. "Where have you been for the last 8 months? I'm the one who helped with homework. I'm the one who drove them to school. I'm the one who taught them right from wrong. What exactly makes them yours?" "Biology, and the fact that this is my house." Is it? Because Yara's been talking about making some changes. Legal changes. The threat was clear. Divorce. Custody battle. With Yara and Trent both testifying that I was an absent, unstable father, I could lose everything. But as I stood there in my own dining room, facing down the man who'd moved in on my family, I realized something important. I wasn't just some absent father anymore. I was home now, and I'd spent the last 8 months in a war zone, learning exactly how to handle threats. Trent might have thought he'd won, but the game was just getting started. "Well," I said, forcing a smile, "I guess we'll see about that." The next morning, I started gathering intelligence. First stop was my neighbor Mrs. Liu, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who'd lived on our street for 20 years and knew everyone's business. "Lucas," she said when she opened her door. "You're back. How was your trip?" "Educational. Listen, Mrs. Liu, I was wondering if you'd noticed anything unusual around my house while I was gone." Her expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Unusual how? Traffic, visitors, that sort of thing." She glanced around, then stepped out onto her porch and lowered her voice. "That man, Trent. He's been there almost every night for months, sometimes the whole weekend." "Anything else?" "The children seem different, quieter. Sophie used to wave when she saw me in the garden. Now she just hurries inside." "Have you seen or heard anything that concerned you?" Mrs. Liu hesitated. "There was one night, maybe 6 weeks ago. I heard shouting, a man's voice, very loud, then crying. It sounded like Ethan." My hands clenched into fists. "Did you call anyone?" "I almost called the police, but then it stopped, and Yara seemed happy with the arrangement, so I thought—" She trailed off, looking guilty. "It's not your fault, Mrs. Liu. You couldn't have known. There's something else." She disappeared into her house and came back with a USB drive. "I installed a security camera last month after some break-ins in the neighborhood. It faces the street, but it picks up your front yard too. You might want to see what's on here." I took the drive with hands that were surprisingly steady. "Thank you." Back home, I plugged the USB into my laptop and started reviewing footage. Most of it was boring: cars passing, delivery trucks, the occasional dog walker. But then I found what Mrs. Liu wanted me to see. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago, around 7 in the evening. The video quality wasn't great, but it was clear enough to show Trent's truck in my driveway and Trent himself standing on my front porch. He was talking to someone just out of frame, probably Ethan, based on the height. Then Trent's posture changed. He stepped forward and his right hand shot out, grabbing something, or someone. He yanked hard, and I could see Ethan stumble into view, Trent's hand wrapped around my son's throat. The video was silent, but I could see Trent's mouth moving, his face inches from Ethan's. My 10-year-old son was frozen with terror. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 seconds before Trent released him, and they both went inside. But it was enough. I copied the file to my hard drive and started planning. My first call was to Dr. Sarah Martinez, our family pediatrician. "Dr. Martinez, this is Lucas Byrne. I need to bring Ethan in for an examination as soon as possible." "Is he sick?" "I have reason to believe he may have been physically disciplined while I was out of the country. I need documentation." There was a pause. "How soon can you get here?" 20 minutes. Ethan didn't want to go to the doctor, which told me everything I needed to know. Kids his age usually didn't mind routine checkups unless they had something to hide. Or something they'd been told to hide. "It's just a regular checkup, buddy," I told him in the car. "Nothing to worry about." "Will you tell Mom we went?" Interesting question. "Do you not want me to tell her?" Ethan stared out the window. "She gets mad when I talk about being hurt." "Has Trent hurt you, Ethan?" Long silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "He says it's not hurting. It's teaching." Dr. Martinez found what I expected her to find. Faded bruises on Ethan's upper arms, consistent with being grabbed hard. a small scar on his shoulder that Ethan claimed came from falling down, but which looked suspiciously like a fingernail mark. "I'm required to report this," Dr. Martinez told me quietly while Ethan got dressed. "I understand, but I'd like to handle it through family court first, if possible. I have evidence, and I think I can resolve this without traumatizing him further." She nodded. "I'll give you 48 hours before I file with Child Protective Services. But Lucas, if that man hurts your son again, he won't get the chance." My next stop was the office of Miriam Gold, the best family lawyer in Vancouver. I'd worked with her on some contract issues a few years back, and I knew she was both brilliant and ruthless. "Lucas," she said, gesturing me into her office, "I heard you were overseas. What brings you in?" I laid out everything: the affair, Trent's presence in my house, the physical discipline, the medical evidence, the security footage. Miriam listened without interrupting, taking notes. "This is actually a stronger case than you might think," she said when I finished. "The documented physical abuse gives us grounds for emergency custody modification. The fact that your wife allowed a non-relative to physically discipline your children shows poor judgment at minimum. What are my options?" "We file for emergency custody today. With the medical evidence and the video, I'm confident we can get the children removed from the home temporarily. Then we proceed with divorce and permanent custody arrangements." "How long?" "Emergency hearing within 72 hours. Permanent arrangements could take months, but your kids will be safe in the meantime." I signed the papers that afternoon. By evening, Yara and Trent would know they were in a fight they couldn't win through intimidation. But I wasn't done gathering intelligence. While Yara was at work and Trent was presumably at his contracting business, I did a thorough search of my own house. I found Trent's clothes in my bedroom closet, his toiletries in my bathroom, a bottle of expensive whiskey I'd never bought hidden behind my tools in the garage. In Yara's nightstand, I found something even more interesting: a burner phone. The text history was illuminating. Messages between Yara and her sister Jennifer, between Yara and her friend Michelle, and between Yara and Trent. The conversations painted a picture of a woman who'd been planning this takeover for months. "Lucas is finally gone for real this time," one message to Jennifer read. "Trent thinks we should just file for divorce and claim abandonment." "Are you sure about this guy?" Jennifer had replied. "He seems pretty controlling." "He's strong. The kids need someone who won't let them walk all over him like Lucas does." There were dozens of messages like that. Yara complaining about my parenting, Trent offering solutions that involved toughening up the kids, her friends either encouraging her or expressing concern. But the most damning messages were between Yara and Trent themselves. "Ethan was mouthy again today," Trent had written 2 weeks ago. "Had to grab him to get his attention. Kids got no respect." "Just don't leave marks," Yara had replied. "We can't give Lucas ammunition if he comes back." "He's not coming back, and if he does, we'll handle it." I screenshotted everything and forwarded it to Miriam Gold. Then I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. That evening, Yara came home to find legal papers waiting on the kitchen counter. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the emergency custody petition. "It's me taking back control of my family." Trent emerged from the living room, where he'd apparently been watching TV like he owned the place. "You can't be serious." "Absolutely serious. You're done putting your hands on my children." "I never hurt them," Trent said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my laptop and showed them the security footage. The video of Trent grabbing Ethan by the throat played in perfect silence. Yara's face went white. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter? The point is, I have it, along with medical evidence, witness statements, and your own text messages planning this whole thing." Trent stepped forward, trying to intimidate me with his size. "You think some grainy video proves anything? Kids need discipline. Any judge will understand that." "Maybe. But will they understand why you were disciplining children who aren't yours, in a house that isn't yours, while sleeping with their mother behind their father's back? This is my house too now, Yara said. We're common law married. I have rights. Actually, you don't. I checked. 8 months isn't long enough to establish common law marriage in British Columbia. And since the house is in my name only, Trent is legally a guest who's overstayed his welcome. I looked directly at Trent. You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out. If you're here when I get back from picking up the kids, I'm calling the police. You can't kick me out, Trent said. Yara invited me to live here. Yara doesn't have the legal authority to invite you to live here. This is my house, and you're trespassing. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. 1 hour, Trent. Don't test me. When I returned with Ethan and Sophie, Trent's truck was gone. Most of his belongings were too, though he'd left behind the expensive whiskey and a few pieces of clothing, probably hoping to come back for them later. Yara was sitting at the kitchen table, crying. You're destroying our family, she said without looking up. No, Yara, you already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. On Wednesday evening, Trent made his final mistake. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard his truck in the driveway. Through the window, I watched him sit there for several minutes, probably working up his courage. Then he got out and marched to the front door. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Trent standing on my porch, clearly drunk and obviously angry. We need to talk, he slurred. No, we don't. You're not welcome here. This is bullshit, man. Those kids love me. They need me. What they needed was not to be grabbed and shaken by some wannabe tough guy with control issues. Trent's face flushed red. I was teaching them respect, something their real father never bothered to do. I'm their real father, and I'm telling you to leave. Or what? You'll call the cops? You think they give a shit about some military contractor who abandoned his family? I smiled, which seemed to confuse him. Actually, I think they'll be very interested in a drunk man harassing a family with a restraining order against him. There's no restraining order. Check your phone. Trent fumbled for his phone and found the message from the court system. The emergency custody petition had included a temporary restraining order preventing him from coming within 100 yards of me or my children. You son of a jerk, he said, stepping forward. That's close enough. I held up my own phone, which was recording video. You're drunk, you're violating a court order, and you're being recorded. I'd suggest you leave now before this gets worse for you. But Trent was too drunk and too angry to think clearly. Instead of leaving, he pushed past me into my house. Where are they? He demanded. Where are my kids? They're not your kids, and they're not here. That was true. I'd sent Ethan and Sophie to stay with my brother for the night, anticipating something exactly like this. Trent stumbled into the living room, looking around wildly. Ethan! Sophie! Come down here right now! They're not here, Trent. It's just you and me. He turned back to me, swaying slightly. You think you're so smart. You think you can just come back and take over like nothing happened. I think I can protect my children from someone who thinks grabbing them by the throat is appropriate discipline. They needed discipline. They were running wild, no respect for authority, no structure. Yara was too soft on them. So you decided to terrorize them instead. I decided to be a man, something you never learned how to do. I kept my phone recording and my voice calm. Tell me, Trent. What makes you think you have any right to discipline children who aren't yours? Because I was here. Because I stepped up when you ran away. Because they needed a father figure. They have a father. Me. Some father. Gone for 8 months, chasing money overseas while your family fell apart. My family was fine before you showed up. Trent laughed bitterly. Your family was a mess. Yara was lonely, the kids were out of control, and you were nowhere to be found. I fixed all of that. You fixed it by having an affair with my wife and physically abusing my children. I never abused anyone. I provided structure. I provided discipline. I provided everything you couldn't be bothered to provide, including bruises on my 10-year-old son's arms. Kids bruise easy. That's not abuse, that's life. I stopped recording and put my phone away. Okay, Trent. I think we understand each other now. Do we? Yeah. You're a drunk, abusive loser who moved in on another man's family because you were too pathetic to build your own. And now you're going to leave my house and never come back. Trent's face went dark. You think you're tough because you were in the military? You think that scares me? I wasn't in the military, Trent. I was a contractor. I built and operated surveillance drones. I'm very good at watching people, gathering information, and solving problems from a distance. So I know you're not as successful as you pretend to be. Your contracting business is failing. You owe money to 3 different suppliers and you're behind on your truck payments. You moved in with Yara because you needed someone to help pay your bills. Trent's confident expression faltered. I also know you've done this before, I continued. Moved in with single mothers, played the father figure role until things got complicated, then moved on. There's a woman in Calgary who filed a police report about you 2 years ago. Similar allegations of inappropriate discipline with her kids. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. You're a predator, Trent. You target vulnerable women with children, move in fast, establish control, and then abuse that control until someone stops you. That's not... The difference is, this time you picked the wrong family. This time the husband came home. I walked to the front door and opened it. Leave now, or I call the police and show them the recording of you admitting to physically disciplining my children. Trent stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to decide if he could take me in a fight. He was bigger, but he was also drunk, and I was stone sober. More importantly, I was fighting for my children, and he was just fighting to avoid consequences. This isn't over, he said finally. Yeah, it is. He stumbled toward the door, pausing when he reached me. You think you've won something here? Yara doesn't love you anymore. She hasn't for years. Even if you get rid of me, she's not coming back to you. I don't want her back. I just want you away from my kids. Trent left, and I immediately called Detective James Renault, the officer assigned to our case. Detective Renault? This is Lucas Byrne. The man named in our restraining order just violated it. I have video evidence of him entering my home while intoxicated and admitting to physically disciplining my children. Are you and your children safe? The children aren't here, and he just left. But I thought you should know. We'll pick him up tonight. Can you email me the video? Already sent. The custody hearing Thursday morning was almost anticlimactic. Miriam Gold presented our evidence methodically. The medical examination, the security footage, the text messages, and the recording from Wednesday night. Yara's lawyer tried to argue that I was an absent father who'd abandoned the family, but the evidence of abuse trumped everything else. Judge Patricia Wong was not impressed with Yara's choices. Mrs. Byrne, she said, you allowed a man with no legal relationship to your children to physically discipline them in ways that left bruises. When your husband returned and objected to this treatment, you supported the other man over the father of your children. This shows a serious lack of judgment regarding your children's welfare. The temporary custody order gave me full physical custody of Ethan and Sophie, with Yara allowed supervised visits twice a week. Trent was banned from any contact with the children and ordered to stay away from our home. But I wasn't satisfied with just winning in court. Trent had terrorized my children and moved in on my family like some kind of predator. Legal consequences weren't enough. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have his life turned upside down by someone else. So I started making phone calls. Trent's contracting business relied heavily on word-of-mouth referrals and his reputation in the community. I began reaching out to his former clients, asking innocent questions about their experiences with his work. Most were satisfied with the construction quality, but several mentioned that he'd been inappropriate with their children. Too physical, too demanding, overstepping boundaries. I connected these parents with each other and with Detective Renault. Suddenly, what had looked like an isolated incident became a pattern of behavior. I also reached out to his suppliers and creditors, not to cause trouble, but to ask questions about payment schedules and credit terms. Word travels fast in the construction industry, and soon everyone knew that Trent Walker was having financial problems. Within a week, 3 clients had canceled upcoming projects, and 2 suppliers had demanded immediate payment on outstanding invoices. But my masterstroke was social media. I created a neighborhood safety group on Facebook and invited every parent within a 5-mile radius. The group's stated purpose was sharing information about local safety concerns, suspicious activity, break-ins, that sort of thing. The first post was a simple warning. Parents should be aware that a local contractor named Trent Walker has been charged with violating a restraining order and has a history of inappropriate physical contact with children. Please exercise caution if he approaches your family for any reason. I included his photo, his truck's license plate number, and the name of his business. The post was shared 47 times in the first day. By the end of the week, Trent's business phone was disconnected and his website was down. His landlord had started eviction proceedings on his apartment, and his truck had been repossessed. But I still wasn't done. On Saturday morning, I was having coffee with Mrs. Liu when she mentioned that Trent had been seen around the neighborhood again. "He was parked at the end of the street yesterday evening," she said, "just sitting in a different truck, watching your house." That was a problem. The restraining order was still in effect, and if Trent was stalking my family, he was escalating the situation in a dangerous way. I thanked Mrs. Liu and went home to check my security cameras. Sure enough, there was Trent in a borrowed pickup truck, parked just far enough away to technically not violate the restraining order, but close enough to watch my house. The footage showed him there for over 2 hours, just watching. I called Detective Renault, who promised to increase patrols in the area. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. Trent was getting desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I was right. Sunday evening, I was helping Sophie with homework when the motion sensors on my security system triggered. Through the cameras, I could see Trent creeping around the side of my house, trying to peer through windows. I quietly sent Sophie upstairs to her room and called 911, then grabbed my phone to record whatever was about to happen. Trent tried the back door first, finding it locked. Then he moved to the sliding glass door that led from the deck into the living room, also locked. But he didn't give up. Instead, he picked up a decorative rock from Yara's garden and smashed the glass. The sound of breaking glass triggered my alarm system, which began blaring. Trent stumbled through the broken door, cutting his hand on the glass, and started shouting, "Ethan! Sophie! Where are you?" I stepped into the living room, phone recording, and calmly said, "They're upstairs, and you're under arrest." Trent spun around, blood dripping from his hand onto my carpet. "You son of a jerk. You destroyed my life." "No, Trent. You destroyed your own life when you decided to put your hands on my children. They needed discipline. They needed protection from you." Sirens were getting closer. Trent heard them too and started looking around frantically, like he was trying to figure out how to escape. "There's nowhere to go," I told him. "You broke into my house while violating a restraining order. You're looking at serious jail time." "This is all your fault," he said, stepping toward me. "Everything was fine until you came back." "Everything was fine? You were abusing my kids and sleeping with my wife in my own house. How exactly was that fine?" "I was taking care of them. I was being a father to them." "You were being a predator." Trent's face went red with rage. "I'm more of a father to those kids than you'll ever be." "Prove it," I said. "What?" "You heard me. Prove it. Show me what kind of father figure you are." Trent looked confused, but he was too angry to think clearly. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Sure you do. You've been telling everyone that you're better for my kids than I am, that you're the father figure they need, so prove it." The sirens were very close now. Trent was running out of time, and I think he knew it. "I took care of them when you abandoned them," he said desperately. "I was here when you weren't. You were here to take advantage of a situation. You moved in on another man's family because you're too much of a loser to build your own." "That's not true!" "Then where's your family, Trent? Where are your kids? Where's your wife? Where's your house? He didn't have an answer for that. The police burst through my front door just as Trent raised his fist like he was going to hit me. 3 officers with guns drawn, shouting commands, and Trent smart enough to put his hands up instead of doing something that would get him shot. They arrested him for breaking and entering, violating a restraining order, and stalking. The blood from his cut hand had left a nice DNA trail through my house, and my security cameras had recorded everything. As they led him away in handcuffs, Trent looked back at me one last time. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "It is." Detective Renault stayed behind to take my statement and examine the damage to my house. "This should be enough to put him away for a while," he said, looking at the broken glass door. "Breaking and entering, stalking, violating a restraining order. He's looking at serious time. What about my wife? What about her?" She enabled all of this. She knew he was physically disciplining the kids, and she supported it. Detective Renault sighed. "That's a family court matter, not a criminal one. Unless she directly participated in the abuse, we can't charge her. So she gets away with it. She lost custody of her kids and her marriage. I wouldn't call that getting away with it." He was right, but it didn't feel like enough. Yara had betrayed not just me, but our children. She'd chosen her affair partner over their safety and well-being. Legal consequences weren't enough for that kind of betrayal. I needed her to understand exactly what she'd lost. The opportunity came the following week, when Yara requested a meeting to discuss reconciliation. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where she couldn't make a scene. She looked terrible, tired, stressed, like she hadn't been sleeping well. "Lucas," she said as soon as I sat down, "we need to talk about fixing this." "Fixing what?" "Our marriage, our family. This whole situation has gotten out of hand." I stared at her for a moment, trying to figure out if she was serious. "Yara, you had an affair. You moved another man into our house. You let him physically abuse our children. What exactly do you think we're going to fix?" "Trent made mistakes," she said quickly. "I see that now. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling, figure out how to move forward." "There is no moving forward. There's only protecting our kids from any more damage." "They're my kids too." "Are they? Because when you had to choose between their safety and your boyfriend's ego, you chose the boyfriend." Yara's eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair. I thought I was doing what was best for them. They needed structure, discipline. They needed protection from a man who grabbed them by the throat when they didn't obey fast enough. He never meant to hurt them. But he did hurt them, and you let him." "I made a mistake," she said, crying openly now. "I was lonely and confused, and I made bad choices. But I love my children, Lucas. I love them more than anything." "If that were true, you would have protected them." I stood up to leave, but Yara grabbed my arm. "Please," she said, "don't do this. Don't destroy our family over one mistake." "I didn't destroy our family, Yara. You did. The moment you chose Trent over Ethan and Sophie, you destroyed it yourself." I pulled my arm free and walked away, leaving her crying in the coffee shop. That should have been the end of it. Trent was in jail, Yara had lost custody, and my kids were safe. But life is never that simple. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Miriam Gold. "We have a problem," she said. "Yara's filed a motion claiming you've been alienating the children against her. She wants increased visitation and joint custody." "Based on what?" "She's claiming that you've poisoned them against her, that you're preventing a healthy relationship between mother and children, and that the supervised visits are unnecessary." "The supervised visits are court-ordered because she enabled abuse. I know that. But her lawyer is arguing that Trent acted independently, that she had no knowledge of any physical discipline, and that she's being punished for his crimes." I felt a familiar cold anger settling in my chest. She's lying. Of course she's lying. But she's lying under oath, with a lawyer's help, and if she's convincing enough, it could work. What do we need to do? We need to prove she knew about the abuse and supported it. Do you still have those text messages? Every single one. Good, because we're going to need them. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. I spent the week preparing, reviewing evidence, and coaching Ethan on what to expect if he had to testify. "Dad," he said one evening while we were going over his statement, "do I have to see Mom again?" The question broke my heart. "What do you mean, buddy?" "If the judge says I have to spend more time with her, do I have to do it? The judge will do what's best for you and Sophie, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always protect you. Always. What if Trent comes back? He won't. He's in jail, and when he gets out, he's not allowed to come near us. But what if he does anyway?" I knelt down so I was at eye level with my son. "Ethan, do you remember when I told you that I used to operate drones in the military?" "Yeah. Do you know what that means?" "You flew robot planes?" "Sort of. It means I'm very good at watching people from far away, and I'm very good at stopping bad people from hurting good people. If Trent ever tries to come near you again, I will stop him. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, but I could see he was still scared. "I promise you," I said, "that man will never hurt you again. Never." The custody hearing was a disaster for Yara. Miriam Gold systematically destroyed her credibility, presenting text message after text message, showing that Yara not only knew about Trent's discipline methods, but actively encouraged them. "Your Honor," Miriam said, "the respondent claims she had no knowledge of physical discipline being used on her children. But here's a text message she sent to Mr. Walker on March 15th. Ethan was talking back again. Maybe he needs a firmer hand to get his attention. She read message after message, painting a picture of a mother who cared more about her affair than her children's well-being. And here's a message from March 22nd. Don't leave marks where Lucas might see them if he comes back early. The judge's expression grew colder with each message. When Yara took the stand to defend herself, she fell apart under cross-examination. Mrs. Byrne, Miriam said, you testified that you had no knowledge of Mr. Walker using physical discipline on your children, but you sent him a text message saying, and I quote, just don't leave marks. Can you explain that? That was taken out of context. What context would make that message appropriate? I don't remember exactly what I meant. You don't remember telling your lover not to leave marks on your children. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Yara broke down crying and couldn't continue her testimony. Judge Wong was not sympathetic. Mrs. Byrne, she said, the evidence clearly shows that you were aware of inappropriate physical discipline being used on your children and that you not only failed to protect them, but actively encouraged it. Your request for increased visitation is denied. Your supervised visits will continue as previously ordered, and I'm adding a requirement that you complete a parenting class and psychological evaluation before any changes to custody will be considered. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I could finally breathe again. My kids were safe, legally and practically. Trent was in jail, Yara's credibility was destroyed, and the court had validated everything I'd been fighting for. But I wasn't done with Yara yet. That evening, I called her. We need to talk, I said when she answered. Lucas, please. Not about reconciliation, not about custody, about consequences. There was a long pause. What do you mean? Meet me at the house tomorrow at noon. Come alone. I don't think that's a good idea. It wasn't a request, Yara. She was waiting on the front porch when I got home from dropping the kids at school. She looked even worse than she had at the coffee shop, hollow-eyed, defeated, like she'd aged 5 years in the past month. Thank you for coming, I said, unlocking the front door. We sat in the living room where Trent had broken in 2 weeks earlier. I'd had the glass door repaired, but you could still see scratches in the hardwood floor where his blood had dripped. You lied under oath yesterday, I said without preamble. Lucas, you committed perjury in a custody hearing involving our children. That's a felony. Yara's face went white. You can't prove that. I pulled out my phone and started reading her text messages aloud, the same ones Miriam had used in court, plus several more that we'd held in reserve. March 8th, Ethan needs to learn respect. Do whatever it takes. March 12th, Sophie was crying about her arm hurting. Kids are so dramatic. March 18th, Lucas would freak out if he saw those bruises. Maybe use a different approach. I looked up at her. Should I continue? What do you want? I want you to understand what you've done. I want you to understand that you chose a man you'd known for a few months over children you'd known their entire lives. I thought I was doing what was best. Stop lying. You weren't thinking about what was best for anyone except yourself. You were lonely and bored, and you found someone who made you feel important. Everything else was just collateral damage. Yara started crying again, but I felt no sympathy for her. Our son flinches when adults raise their voices now, I continued. Our daughter asks me every day if the mean man is coming back. They're in therapy because of choices you made. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't fix the damage you've done. Then what do you want from me? I leaned forward, making sure she was looking directly at me. I want you to disappear. What? I want you to sign over full custody to me, waive any claim to alimony or property settlement, and disappear from our lives. I can't do that. They're my children. Are they? Because children need mothers who protect them, not mothers who enable their abuse. I would never let anyone hurt them. You already did. You let Trent hurt them for months while you were too busy playing house to notice or care. Yara was sobbing now, but I wasn't finished. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to sign the papers my lawyer draws up. You're going to give up any claim to custody, visitation, or child support. You're going to move away from Vancouver and start a new life somewhere else. And if I don't? Then I release all of your text messages to the media, along with the security footage of Trent grabbing Ethan and the medical records showing bruises on both kids. I make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you really are. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Yara looked away. How long do I have? 1 week to sign the papers. 2 weeks to be out of the province. Lucas, please, they're my babies. I love them. If you loved them, you would have protected them. Since you didn't, the best thing you can do for them now is get out of their lives before you cause any more damage. Yara left without another word. I watched her drive away and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. She signed the papers 3 days later. By the end of the month, she was gone. 6 months later, Ethan and Sophie were thriving. The nightmares had stopped, the flinching had disappeared, and they were back to being normal, happy kids. We'd moved to a new house across town, fresh start, no bad memories, and settled into a routine that worked for all of us. Trent was sentenced to 18 months in prison for breaking and entering, stalking, and violating a restraining order. His contracting business was bankrupt, his reputation was destroyed, and according to Detective Renault, he'd be deported back to the United States when he finished his sentence. Yara had moved to Toronto and found work at a clinic there. She sent birthday cards to the kids but didn't ask for visitation or contact. I think she finally understood that the best thing she could do for them was stay away. As for me, I started my own consulting business, specializing in security systems and surveillance technology. Turns out, there's good money in helping people protect what matters to them. I was in my home office one evening, working on a proposal, when Ethan knocked on the door. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course, buddy. What's up? Do you think Mom will ever come back? It was the first time he'd asked about her in months. I thought carefully about my answer. I don't know, I said honestly. Would you want her to? Ethan considered this. Maybe, but only if she promises never to bring any more mean people to our house. That's fair. Dad? Yeah? I'm glad you came home from Qatar. I pulled him into a hug, thinking about everything that had happened since I'd walked through that front door 8 months ago. The betrayal, the fear, the anger, the fight to protect my children from people who should have protected them. Me too, buddy, I said. Me too. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep, I stood on my back deck, looking out at the city lights of Vancouver. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This isn't over," it read. I smiled and deleted the message without responding. Some people never learn when they've been beaten. But I'd learned something important over the past year. When someone threatens your family, you don't just defend them. You make sure the threat never comes back. I went inside, locked the doors, and checked the security system one more time. My children were safe, my house was secure, and anyone stupid enough to threaten my family again would discover exactly what I'd learned in 8 months of operating military drones in hostile territory. Some wars are worth fighting, and some wars you have to win completely.